Welcome to RIT Talk. We're here to raise awareness about mental health. One way of doing that is to talk about it, and that's what we're going to do. Have a great day, don't quit, and keep pushing forward. And today we're going to talk with Pete. Go ahead, tell us a little bit about yourself, Pete.
My name is Peter Ephraimson. I'm a retired federal firefighter. I worked for the U.S. Army at Yuma Proving Ground from 1994 through 2024. I retired from the fire department in 2019 or 2020 and went to dispatch at the police department and finished out my last little bit there. And then I was fortunate enough to be able to retire, and that's it. So,
All right.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, let's go ahead.
How'd you get into the fire service?
I had been wanting to get into the fire service since I was probably 6 or 7 years old.
Mhm.
I was a big fan of emergency. My dad worked for Clark County and was the labor attorney for Clark County Fire Department and knew the fire chief. And somewhere in this mess of mine, I have a picture of me at the old Clark County Fire Department headquarters, which no longer exists. And I was climbing all over their truck. And back in them days, they had a tiller truck, and I had a picture of me and my brother and with the fire chief, Roy Parrish. Roy Parrish was the fire chief during the MGM fire and the Hilton fire.
Okay.
And he is long since retired, and I'm not even sure if he's still alive at this point. But so that stayed with me my entire life, as I grew up. And when I went to college, the first thing I did when I turned 18 was I went to the city of Missoula, because I was in Missoula at the University of Montana. And I went to the city of Missoula, and they said, "No, we don't have anything, for you. You got a test." And
Okay.
and then they said, "Go talk to the rural fire district." And what a rural fire district is in Montana, you have city fire departments, and you have rural fire districts, and then you have volunteer rural fire departments. So Missoula had a rural fire district that was fairly big, and they had uh, 6 stations at that time, 30 paid staff, and they had 100 volunteers. So I signed up to be a volunteer. And at the time, during the summers, 85, 86, 87, my first 3 years of college, I was working for the Bureau of Land Management out of Las Vegas, Nevada. And uh, a side note, we used to have the Yuma crew move up and cover Vegas. So I knew a
Oh,
lot of the
really?
Yuma guys. And
Okay.
then my second summer, I worked with a guy, C.R. Waters, with me at Pahrump, Nevada, and which is a little city outside of Las Vegas where all the bordellos are. And uh and he worked at Rural Metro in Yuma, and then worked for the BLM. And when I first met him, he was Helitac. He was a helicopter crewman on the helicopter out of Vegas. And then he went back to an engine in 86, and that's when I got to work with him. So when I came back here to
Small world.
Montana, when I came here, fast forward, when I came here, he and I reconnected after many years, 20 something years or
Oh,
something.
okay. That's cool.
Anyway, and we've stayed good friends, and all that. As I So I joined Missoula Rural, and I was a volunteer until 1989, probably. And then I was hired as what's called a resident firefighter, which means you
Okay.
live in the station and you do basically all the kitchen work. You clean kitchens, bathrooms, uh, and you augment the crew. There's only one guy on duty at that station, at the stations I was at, and then there was a labor dispute, and I was assigned to other stations where there was no paid staff because those guys had gone on strike.
Okay.
Uh, and I was there until uh, uh, I went back to test at Clark County, Nevada. I failed the physical agility because uh, a guy was there. There was one monitor for two guys doing the hose connection to the hydrant. And back in those days, you didn't have a CPAT test, so generally what you had was individual events. So at Clark County, one of the individual events was a uh, connect three hoses to a hydrant and then
Okay.
unconnect the three hoses and put them back in the squares painted on the pavement. So it was a test of could you do what was asked of you and how fast could you do it and could you do it in time. So there was one monitor with a stopwatch with two stopwatches. There was two guys testing and he was looking at him. I finished and I didn't say anything to the guy. And I ended up being 3 seconds over the required time. So I got booted and it killed me because Roy Parrish, the guy I was telling you about before, told me he didn't care where I finished on the list. I could be the last guy. If I finished on the list, he was gonna hire me. And
Okay.
he looked into it and said, "Man, tough break. Sorry, I can't help you." And so I went to. From that point, I went to California. My folks basically said either join the military or go back to school. And so I found a I had when I worked for the BLM, I had known guys that had been at Shasta Junior College in Redding, California, and other guys who had been at Columbia Junior College in Sonora, California. Both those both those programs had a unique feature, which was they had an on-campus fire department that was run all by the students, one paid chief, and then all student firefighters. So I
Huh.
went to Shasta, and I spent 2 years up there, and I was a firefighter. I was a tailboard rider. Uh, I was a driver, and I was a uh, crew chief, crew leader. And
Okay.
I was very basic. We did very basic stuff, BLS, EMS. We did all manual extrication, porta powers, high lift jacks, all that stuff. We didn't do any, there was no jaws or anything like that. Back at, again, that was 90, and not every department had a set of jaws. And I was there uh 90, 91, and part of 92. And then I came back to Missoula, and I was there back as a resident, and that was the middle of the labor strife. So I was being assigned to stations that didn't have any paid guys. I was all by myself. And then uh I finished out working at a station that eventually closed. And I was all alone up there. I had a group of volunteers that I kind of supervised, not really, but I was basically the guy, because there was no paid guy up there. And
Okay.
it was in there was a joint area that was recently annexed city of Missoula, and then rural fire district north of there in this area called the Rattlesnake. It was a big canyon. And I was I had to work with the city, and we had mutual stuff like we had a couple of nursing homes and stuff we responded to. And I had basically a type 3 engine that I drove, and I was in charge of making sure it gets fueled and doing all the stuff. The volunteers would help me, but essentially it was my responsibility. And then I thought I tested at Missoula Rural, and I thought I gotta get it together. And a couple of things personally happened to me, and my uh I basically had to decide what I was going to do. So I decided that I was going to put in for departments. And I had tested previously when I was at Shasta, and I didn't really rank anywhere. Um, Back in those days, and amazingly, back in those days, you had 5,000 guys putting in for 30 spots in the academy,
Hmm.
one academy. Um,
Wow.
you had some departments had an A and a B list, like Cal Fire had an A and a B list. If you made the A list, you were starting now. If you made a B list,
Okay.
maybe later. But I never made, best I ever did, I think was, 50th or something like that. And basically you had to have a perfect written score because you had 5,000 guys testing, and the odds were that those guys were those guys were gonna make it.
Yeah.
There was gonna be a
Hmm.
whole bunch of guys with 99s and 100s, and if you didn't get a 99 or 100, you weren't gonna make the first cut. And
Okay.
so I tested a lot at the college, but also at the college, I knew a lot of guys we had during the college, and I hate to go back and forth like a loop, but back at the college, one of my classes to get my associate's degree was what was called career placement. And every Friday, a guy who had been at the college would come back and say, "This was my experience. This is how I got to where I was." Well, a couple guys came back and said, "We work for the DoD, and if you want to travel the world and
Ah.
promote, uh, you can go to the DoD, but the schedule's different."
Hmm.
I conveniently forgot about that fact when I put in for YPG. Uh, but yeah, we had a couple guys. There was a guy that was the chief at the Veterans Administration Fire Department. And there are a number of veterans hospitals that have VA fire departments. And then there was another guy that worked at Alameda Naval Air Station in San Francisco. And so in those days, no computers. You filled out the standard form 171, which was this big green form, and you filled that whole out with all your work experience and everything else.
With a
And
pen and paper?
yeah, all pay. Oh yeah, absolutely, all paper. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was even carboned. And so I
Oh,
hand filled
wow.
it out, sent it in, and I got an offer for. I put in for Sierra Army Depot outside Reno. I
Okay.
put in for Alameda Naval Air, and I put in for Yuma because I was from Las Vegas and Yuma was the closest place. I
Hmm.
didn't think to put in for Nellis in Vegas, uh, partially because I had heard that getting on with the Air Force was tough, uh,
Okay.
and I wanted to be back kind of in the desert, you know. So I got notified that I got chosen. They called me. The civilian personnel office called me and said, "Come on down." Uh, My dad flew me down here, paid for a plane ticket so I could fly down and see what the heck I was getting into. Nobody from Sierra or Alameda even talked to me. I never got anything back from those guys. So
Okay.
Yuma, I go down and look at Yuma. I went to Station Two. At that point, Station Two was maybe 3 years old.
Oh,
The
wow.
old one, the old
Yeah.
Station Two that,
Hmm.
and it was beautiful building, brand new engine. Engine was probably a 90. The Darley, old Darley, if you remember the old Darley, that
Yeah.
was brand
That was
spanking.
that was
Oh,
brand new.
yeah, it's brand new. Yeah, brand spanking and looked, I mean, awesome. It was awesome. And
Oh,
of
yeah.
course, I'm in Missoula, and I'm on a rig that was built in like 1985.
Hmm.
It's a big GMC, but all of our Type 1 engines were 74 75s. They
Oh,
were they
wow.
were American LaFrance Pioneers, which was a very strange looking truck. It had a very funny windshield, like an air traffic control tower, and had a stick, no automatics or anything. So I get here, and here's these guys, and I'm visiting the guys from Station Two, and this old crusty guy, uh, Stafford, I think it
Yeah.
was
I
John
remember him.
Stafford, yeah. And I said, how is it working here? He says, "Oh, it's great." And of course, there was military, there.
Yeah.
We had soldiers at that point,
Hmm.
which was different, and I didn't know anything about that. And of course, I didn't know anything about being on the military side and everything. And he's telling me everything, and I think, man, this is great. And so I come back and I accept, and they tell me report this day. So I good story again. I got I notified Missoula Rural Fire District that I was leaving, and
Hmm.
I had to do all my stuff, turn in all my gear and my badge and all that junk. And a bunch of guys wanted to throw me a party. One of the guys was uh he was the head of Cal Fire's fire protection. He was like the 5-star chief at Cal Fire. He knew a mutual friend of mine that had brought me up and kind of helped me out while I was at Missoula Rural all those years. And
Okay.
I went to a fire. I totally blew him off. And so they were out there at the park eating hamburgers, and I show up like 2 hours late, and I felt awful. That guy was a super nice guy. Um, and of course my friend Tim and a couple other people, Tim's wife, and it was very, kind of a small thing, but I felt awful about blowing that guy off. But I was at Station Three, we got to run. Psst, off I went. So
Duty calls.
I well, and we ran about 2,000 calls a year, and I probably ran 2 or 3 calls a week, and man, I blew dates off. I blew everything off. It was all about, I didn't care. And I had, a number of, I was in a car, getting ready to go on a date. We got a call. I hadn't left the rattlesnake. We showed up. It was a code. Uh, and I went in there and I'm doing CPR and the whole thing. And my girlfriend at the time walks in, sees this big mess, completely loses her composure, starts crying and everything, and that was kind of the geeky stuff that I did when I dated. So anyway, finished, got the important story was that I got offered the job here and I was all ready to report. And the guy called me up and said, "We screwed up. There was a guy that had veterans preference over you, and we're going to rescind the offer because we're going to
Hmm.
give this other guy an offer." So now I got to go running back to Missoula Rural and cry and plead, "Can I have my old job back?" And I was mad and all that stuff. And at the time, I was working nights at a gas station, like an AM/PM kind of a place.
Hmm.
Uh, and I had quit there, so I had to go running back get that job again. And um, and then like 2 weeks later, they called me back and said the guy took a position at Long Beach Naval Shipyard. And would you still like to come to Yuma? And I said, sure, I'll come to Yuma. So when I arrived, my first week at Yuma was that was the week they announced the first BRAC list.
Oh, wow.
And guess who was on the BRAC list? Long Beach Naval Shipyard.
Whoops.
Yeah. Well, not really. I never knew for sure, but the rumor was that the city of Long Beach picked up all those guys straight across. They
Oh,
didn't
okay.
take a test. Uh,
Okay.
but anyway, so here I am at Yuma, and I'm at Station One, and I didn't know anything about anything, and I had never done. We had airport responsibility at Missoula Rural, but that changed about 5 years into being a volunteer with them. So I didn't really do any aircraft calls, and I certainly wasn't certified. And
Hmm.
when I got at, I didn't know anything about anything. I mean, and uh, Jack Bailey was the military NCO for the military guys. Was also the training officer, and
Oh, that's crazy.
it was a crazy time. We had very little aircraft, two helicopters and a fixed wing when I first started. So
Hmm.
little aircraft, but we also got the Golden Knights every year. And so
Yeah,
every
that's
year
right.
the
Yeah.
Golden, and it was the year after the big accident. The big accident
Okay.
was the summer or the winter previous in '93. And um so I got issued my holster kit, my paramedic holster kit with my knife and my scissors, and because those guys didn't have any of that stuff and they had a terrible time cutting the guys down for the trees. So everybody was issued one. That was one of the big deals that came out of that.
Okay.
So and if they caught you not wearing it, boy, there was heck to pay. The chief at the time was a guy named Jim Derby, who was a good chief, took care of you, but man, you know, it was his way or the highway, and that's
Hmm.
just the way it was. And he didn't really believe in that. We had no mutual aid. He didn't believe in it. But I would say he didn't believe in it, but we had no mutual aid signed with anybody. We still responded off
Okay.
post, but his whole thing was like, you'd say, "Why don't you go to the county chief's meeting?" And he'd say, "I got a department. I don't have time for that kind of silliness." But he was a good chief and he was well respected on the base. So we got everything we ever needed. If we needed an engine, we got it, if whatever. And that's where I was, and I was there for till 2000 and let's see, 24 2019, I guess. And
Okay. A
uh
few years.
yeah, and worked at that time when I was hired. The alarm room was a rotational spot for all the firefighters. So all the firefighters
Okay.
rotated working a night in the alarm room the whole night. There was a bed in there. No 911, just a 7-digit or a 4-digit fire phone. And
Hmm.
we had the ambulance because the ambulance got lost on the way to a call.
Oh, yeah, from the
Uh,
clinic.
yep. So we had two clinic medics and the ambulance there, and they were supposed to be, that was kind of a constant thing because sometimes they'd say we don't work for you guys, so they didn't have to clean the bathrooms or whatever. But what we like, I said the chief was a tough guy, so he he would go down and talk to the commander or talk to the head of the clinic and say, you got to get these guys in line or whatever. So, and I worked everywhere. I worked ambulance, I worked engine, I worked crash. I liked them all. I never promoted past firefighter. I was a relief driver, but I never really drove. And that's because one of the reasons I got out of the fire department was my eyes got screwed up and I didn't trust myself at night if I was tired.
Mm.
And I didn't want to have that on me, having an accident with a crew.
Yeah.
I had accidents previously. Not my fault, mechanical failures and nothing serious. Ran my engine into the ditch, ran a type 1 into the ditch. And but I knew I did not want to get that. I didn't, no way I was gonna take that kind of responsibility. So anyway, that was and we had all the cool toys, man. We had Jaws. I mean, we had I remember going back to Missoula and sitting down with the guys at Missoula Rural, and they'd say, "Well, how does it work?" And I'd say, we send 9 guys out, 11 guys out on a call, and they're like, "Are you kidding? Every call?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Chief, too, every call," and they couldn't believe it. They because there were days where you'd be the only one, and I learned how to lay in forward to a fire by myself. And I at least I was ready to go. Somebody had to hook into the hydrant, but I did all the stuff, laying in, dragging the hose out, wrapping the hydrant, pulling forward, and then getting my tack line ready and then packing out and going to work.
Oh yeah, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, exactly. And as you well know, I mean, here in Yuma, that was also kind of the way it was, long time ago. It was a different kind of a time, and they, no way that would fly. It's still around.
Yeah.
County, California, Cal Fire's still doing, I think, one guy stations, and LA County's running some 2-man stations, and Cal Fire runs a lot of 2-man engine companies. But in the city of Reading, when I was up there, they were running 2-man engine companies, and it took them darn near to 2000 to get the third guy, from the city.
Yeah.
So, but that was long, NAP 1500 was brand new and in the 80s, and nobody, who's got money for this, that was their deal.
Well, yeah, I know, until something happens.
Well, exactly, in some places, you know what I'm talking about, are still struggling with it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's it.
All right. So when did radios come into the picture?
Well, we were running, the deal was,
I think of radios.
yeah, I know. Well, that was one of my things. Communications was one of my big deals. And when I was in Missoula, we were pretty hot stuff because we were one of the few departments that had multi-channel radios. And we had 16-channel radios on all the rigs. So we could talk to everybody. There was no state mutual aid frequency, so you just went over to wherever the other guy was. A lot of the departments were still running low band, like CHP. And guys were making the switch. So I did a lot of that, learned a lot about a lot. Because a friend of mine, this guy that kind of watched over me, he was the director of fire management for the state of Montana Forestry Division. So, and his office was like 3 blocks from the fire station. So, man, I just go walk in, and there was maybe a staff of 10. And I would just walk in the building and just, hey, what's going on? Go sit in his office, and I got introduced to his radio tech, who taught me a lot of stuff.
Okay.
And so when I came to, well, of course, when you go to, when I went to California, whole different deal, Cal Fire, big operation, in the spring or the summer, if you had a traffic accident or a roadside fire or a brush fire, you got depending on the day, you got 3 to 5 Type 1 engines, you got 2 water tenders, you got 2 aircraft, you got a helicopter, you got a battalion chief, and you got a dozer and 2 crews. And so if you were the first guy there, Cal Fire expected you to be on your game. They would teach you what to
Yeah.
do. They didn't expect you to be this grand statistician, Alan Bruno Sr. or anything, but you were expected to give a good size up and to determine whether all those resources were going to be needed or they could all go home.
Okay.
And you never talked to the aircraft because you weren't smart enough for that. But yeah. So that again, you learned all about all the frequencies and everything you had to do and how that all worked and what it was like on a fire with tactical channels and command channels and of course there were big fires in Reading. I have pictures of going to the fairgrounds where we had everything. There was stuff from all over the place. State of Oregon had stuff parked in the fairgrounds. Strike teams of engines
Mhm.
and whatnot. So you learned all about that, and that was when I took my assessment center for captain for Shasta. You sat in a like what does Phoenix have, that command thing where they
EOC or
command CTC command training center, where they've got the simulation. You sit in the truck. It's like a
oh,
vehicle. Remember, you ever
okay.
seen that thing? Well, what we did is that they gave you a portable radio, and there was like two screens, and they gave you slides.
Hmm.
No, still, that's how you did it. So there'd be slides of a scene. You were expected to give a size up and be graded on that size up
Okay.
over the
Yeah.
radio. And they would always throw something in like lines down. So they made a big deal about safety stuff. So when you got the lines down thing, you had to make sure that you notified dispatch and all units that lines were down. Uh,
Hmm.
as they came, and other guys would be role playing in the back, and they'd be coming up on the airplane, other engines, and you'd have to give them assignments and all that stuff. That was my assessment center for captain. And
Okay.
yeah, so I was doing communication stuff big time at Shasta, and then I came back to Missoula, same deal. I started getting into programming, and then I came to Yuma, and when I got to Yuma, we had one channel, and the rule was that channel one on every radio in an apartment, in fact, on the base, had to be range control. There was
Hmm.
no Cibola range at that time. There was only range control that held Cibola and Kofa.
Okay.
And uh, and of course you learned all about, well, not really. You didn't really learn anything about talking to the range or any of that stuff. But we had one channel, so you were expected to handle everything on one channel. Back in those days, we were a little busier than we are now. There was
Yeah.
one year we ran like 700 calls in a year, and we would run concurrent calls, and you would have to manage both concurrent calls on one channel.
Hmm.
I dispatched in the alarm room, and of course, in the other, you had to make sure you could talk to people, and that's how I ended up in the alarm room. Actually, was there
Okay.
was a kid, military kid, Dowd. I can't remember his first name, but I was in there visiting. Uh, he took off for the bathroom. I covered him. We had a medical. I ran the medical, and the chief came in and offered me a grade bump if I stayed in the alarm room, and
The
was apparently pretty impressed with what I did. But yeah,
rest is history.
so then 2000 or thereabouts, we got the we started to interface with the Yuma area and the big trunk system that they put together.
Mhm.
And so I worked with those guys, and I worked with those guys on how to set the radios up and who we could talk to. And it was a big deal because we had never had that kind of ability to talk to all the
Hmm.
local agencies like and that ended up being a significant thing because back before we did that, we had a big brush fire at Martinez Lake. We had our guys in a pickle, a bit. Fire was coming at a house they were protecting, and they called me to get help. They couldn't talk to the IC because they didn't have the IC's radios, so I had to do the phone game, calling rural metro, calling the IC. We need to, and could have hurt guys, and so it was big. That's a big deal, and
Hmm.
so that was a big, that was a big deal, and I helped. Now you guys carry the radios. They've got thousands of channels. It's basically a
Hmm.
little computer that you talk on, and you have access to uh, not only the local folks but the Imperial County guys over in the state
Yep.
of California and and all the national mutual aid stuff, which
It's
is
all on one radio now.
what's that?
For the most part, it's all on one radio now.
Exactly. Absolutely. And that was the other problem. You had some
You don't
guys
have
that
to
were
have one
on
in each
one
hand.
band, you had some guys that were on another band, couldn't talk to them because the two bands, and now you got this APX 8000 that does everything.
Yep.
And that's pretty much what everybody's carrying, so that's the cool part. So yeah, and I'm a ham radio operator, been a ham radio operator for I don't know, since the early 90s or something like that.
Okay.
Finally got my license. And so yeah, I'm just, I got radios all over here, and I'm programming a radio today. Uh so yeah, it's just kind of, going to San Diego tomorrow or end of the week to to see a show, and there's going to be a program where their state of California is doing they're going to bring their trucks, their communication stuff,
Oh, okay.
and then tomorrow I go to Phoenix for a repeater, Arizona Repeater Association. They're doing a big deal on a kind of a shortwave. It's called HF, high frequency radio. They're doing a big deal on that, big
Okay.
show kind of a thing. So I'm going to go and I'm going to attend that and stay the night and come back the next day.
All
But
right.
yeah, it's it's something. It's a hobby, something to do. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the people that I mess around with. I kind of stay away from there's kind of guys, most of the guys I hang around with in the ham community are former public safety guys. They're either communications engineers, broadcast engineers, or actual public safety guys. So I'm kind of tied in with a group that's out of LA, and almost everybody in that group is a former cop, fireman, uh,
Okay.
uh, or public safety communications engineer. So we don't talk about, it's all about the technical stuff, and it's not, nobody's, talking about prepping for doomsday or any of
Oh,
that
I
stuff.
see. Okay.
And that's the thing that a lot of guys do. So, that's fine with them. That's not
Mhm.
anything, you know, I'm kind of because a lot of it is frankly, I'm not real happy with the government, yada yada yada, and I don't want to deal with it. So anyway, there's that. So
So what would you say is the best part of your career? Firefighting career.
that's tough. Uh, I don't know. There was a bunch. I got to go to Yellowstone for the fires. That was a lot of fun. I spent 10 days there. And that was the first large campaign kind of fire that I'd been on. We had been on bigger fires at the BLM, but nothing that big.
Okay.
I liked YPG. I mean, some of the reasons I liked it were real weird. I loved it because on a on a you know on a Sunday night you could go out and see all the stars at the airfield, and there
Mhm.
was nobody around, and it was quiet, and there was just the few of you most of the time there, and no bosses or anything.
Back before there was a fence.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Back before all that, security stuff.
Way back. Yep.
Yeah. Well, and again, it was an open post back in those days, so people would drive from one side of the river to the other, through the base.
Oh,
Caught
I didn't even think of
caught a lot
that.
of calls that way. Uh,
Ah, okay.
yeah, guys would just drive right up to the station. Um, let's see. I think it was probably the people. You you are as close to those folks, and everybody says this. You're as close to those folks as you are to your own family. And the Fed guys, even more so, because we work more, the guys worked in the city work 10 a month, we work 13. And so you're closer, good and bad,
Yeah.
and some guys that you would rather not be around, and some guys that you really like being around. One of the things I tried to do was I tried to make sure that I had a life outside the department. I didn't want my wife to think that that was all that I did. But I mean, look, everybody helped me move twice, and
Mm,
I helped other guys, and good, bad. Went to guys' weddings and went to visit guys in the hospital and all that stuff.
mhm.
But yeah, I liked my time there. I was disappointed. I miss it. Wife gives me nothing but grief every time I see a fire truck. Um, but uh, yeah, it was a really good experience, and I don't, I can't. There were bad days, of course, but for the
Yeah,
most part, it was good. It's a good group to be associated with, and I said this at the dinner that you guys hosted for me. What
mhm.
we do matters, and that was important to me. That I'm not putting a bolt or a nut on a bolt every day for 8 hours. What we do makes a difference, and I was very fortunate enough in my career that I never got to deliver one baby. Man, that was, I'm not sure. I'm torn whether I
Oh,
would want to do that or not. But I got to. There were three people that were clinically dead when I found them, and they were alive when we left the emergency room. And man, that was huge. That was a big deal. On the other hand, the first time I went to uh, my first witness code, where the guy was alive talking to me and then he was dead and he died. And that
yeah.
kind of messed me up a little bit. So, but on the whole, 40 years, from 1985 to 2019, thereabouts, it was a good experience. Much, much, much,
Good.
much more good than bad. One of the one of the stories, I will tell some tales. I got one more tale to tell. So some years ago I picked up a used CHP Dodge Ram Charger. I'm a big Dodge Ram Charger fan. So this thing had been built up and lifted and everything else. And everybody was giving me grief about it because it was black and white. And so one particular guy who is now a senior chief at the city of Yuma, and one guy that is now a senior chief with Yuma Proving Ground, decided they were going to have a lot of fun with me. So I was getting ready to go home, and somebody very luckily said, "Hey man, do you see all that stuff that's on your undercarriage?" And they had wrapped my driveline with duct tape and wrapped it all over everything. So I got under there and undid it all, and said, "I'm gonna get those guys." So I drove home and I called one of the two guys and I said, "Hey man, can you give me a ride to work tomorrow? My truck's broke." And he, "What happened?" I said, "Well, I was going home, my driveline fell off." And something like my universal joint, and so I said, "Can you give me a ride?" "Yeah, I can give you a ride." And so I get home, and turns out these two guys are looking for me because they know that I'm probably fibbing. And but they're feeling the pressure because they think maybe they really did break my truck. So and of course, I'm giving the one guy a bunch of grief. And I'm saying, trying to get pregnant, and the family's trying to get pregnant, and fertility treatments. I got to spend all this money fixing my truck, and man, and everything else. So I race home, and when I raced to my house, those two guys were at my house, and we are all just having a great laugh about it, and they thought that it was, good job on the whole baby thing, and way to make us sweat a little bit. But and that was, a lot of practical jokes, and
Yep.
a lot of practical jokes. But that's the environment of the firehouse. The old saying is, you always knew that you were liked if you got picked on, and it wasn't so much that if you didn't get talked to very much. So as much as you hated getting all the razzing you got, it was a good, it was,
Yeah.
so.
What, if you can you narrow it down to something that you really miss about working in the fire service?
That's probably an easy one. I miss going code 3 to calls. I miss that more than anything else.
Okay.
That was the most fun that you could have and not be drunk.
Legally.
Yeah, legally. It was a blast, and driving that big engine, someplace less so at Yuma, but when I was at Missoula, man, I was in the middle of traffic and
Okay.
blasting the horn and blowing lights and the whole deal, and it was a lot of that was probably the thing that I liked the most about getting to go to, getting everything was going to the calls, and
Okay.
so.
All right. So what's one thing that you think could help with firefighter mental health, whether you're retired or still on the job?
Well, we're already doing it, but the peer support groups or peer support groups and um the after action mental health kind of deals that we're doing. I forget what we're calling it, CISD, I think. Um I think that is a I think that's it's very important. Um
Okay.
uh I went through a couple of fatalities, not anybody that I knew, but guys that, my first year at the BLM, we went to a funeral for a guy at City of Las Vegas that died in the line. Um, I don't like going to funerals. I would much rather cover for the other guys that go because they're kind of hard for me to go to. Um, of course, YPG had a guy who died. Um,
Mhm.
uh, he was technically, off duty, but he was working for us still. Um, and those things are hard. We never lost anybody due to an incident. Um, thank God. Uh, but a lot of guys don't. You know, I don't know if a lot of guys understand how thin the line you walk is over there. It doesn't take much, and everybody could get zapped in one fell swoop. Um, and so, but yeah, peer support for sure. Um, I think that uh, I think that the stuff that departments are doing, Orange County Fire had a very recent traffic accident with their hand crew. One of their crew buggies
Mhm.
hit a ladder on the freeway and rolled over, and departments from as far away as Santa Barbara came in and covered them so that those guys could be off and be with their families, go get counseling, that kind of thing. Um, when I started, I was kind of at the back end of the whole tough it out bunch of guys, tough it out, go get a smoke. Um, uh, and, and, you didn't, you joked about stuff, but you really didn't talk about it at the kitchen table, as a lot of
Mhm.
guys say, that's the nucleus for the house is at the kitchen table. And, um, and we just, I think guys have maybe a lot harder time now. Um, and I think that, the current mental health stuff is helping. I'm just trying to think of anything that, I think the administrative side's support for things like CISD, taking guys out of the rotation, taking them off duty, bringing in other folks to cover them. I think that's all very important because um, everybody reacts differently to traumatic
Mhm.
events. I've seen some guys, and of course, some of these are personal traumatic events, and some of them are department traumatic events. I've seen guys completely lose it, and that they're very upset. They can't handle stuff. Of course, you and I are both familiar with the fact that some guys have taken their own life locally. And we had and that goes all the way back to when I first started. There was a guy that took his own life at the city behind Station 4 many years ago,
Okay.
and that's why there's no trees back there anymore.
Mhm.
But um, I don't know. I think what we're doing is good. I just think we need to do more of it, and
Okay.
uh, and have guys talk about stuff. I think one of the things probably even though we have come so far is the entire concept that uh, a guy feels like he's in a spot and doesn't feel like there's any support. He feels like
Mhm.
he's dealing with whatever it is all alone. You know, great little anecdote, story between two guys. And the one guy says to the other, I know you're having a tough time. And he says, guy walks down the street and falls in a hole. Can't get out. And first guy comes and says, I can't help you. Second guy comes and says, I can't help you. Third guy comes and jumps in the hole. And the guy says, "What are you doing?" He says, "It's okay. I've been here before. I know the way out." And that's it's just that. It's supporting the guys. And it's supporting, as much as guys don't want to talk about it, it's supporting admin. How would you like to be the guy that has to go and notify the family? Don Kist had to do it twice, you know, and I know that wrecked him a little bit. He didn't like, that's not anything anybody wants to do. Hardest thing anybody's got to do, and it's the responsibility of the fire chief. And everybody says, well, he's the fire chief. That's how he got where he is. But that's some rough stuff. And um, I've known fire chiefs that had to stop. We had a guy in Missoula Rural got hit by a train in a water tender in the middle of the night on a structure fire.
Wow.
Traumatic brain injury, the whole works. The guy he's a different guy now, completely different personality. And the fire chief had to pull over and throw up on the way to the house to notify the family.
Yeah.
Um, it, you
Understandable.
know, and I think talking about it, nobody wants to. It's kind of it's the whole you're not tough enough. Don't talk about it. I think it's better now, a lot better than it used to be. But I think the stuff we're doing now is good, and I think that what we're doing is that we need to do. We just need to do more of it. And guys on the line need to understand that admin deals with those issues too. And
Yeah.
sometimes you know as well as I do. So some guys deal with stuff well, and other guys look for other ways to address what they're feeling. And sometimes that's drugs and alcohol, and you and I both know where that can lead.
Yeah.
And it's tragic, and but yeah, I guess that's it. That's just I'm glad that the support is better now than it was. When I walked away from that code, I came back, I hung up my gear, and I walked out of the fire station and left. And I did not feel like I called my mother because I didn't know anybody else to talk to. And of course, I didn't want to come off as being weak because I thought,
Yeah.
they're gonna get rid of me. They're not gonna like me. And but it was a hard thing to sit there and see a guy talking to us 1 minute, and by the time we left the house, he was dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's it's tough. But anyway, I think what you're doing is part of the solution. Bringing it up, letting guys talk about what's going on with them, and how far we've come, as a service, and what we're where we're going. And like again, like everybody says, guys coming up now they're smarter, they're stronger, they're better physically fit, they take care of themselves better. You know, when I started, I worked with a guy that that fried up something in the deal and poured that grease right on that piece of meat and ate it, and smoked like a chimney and drank like a fish. And you know he didn't last too long after he retired. And you got guys now that are, they're Olympic, level athletes and triathlons and marathon runners like you and you know, I kind of got caught in the middle. I like my cheeseburgers too much. But yeah, we got better guys, we got smarter guys, we got more insightful guys, and a lot of the stigma's gone. So guys could say things like, this is hard. I got to go home, or I got to get off, or um uh and it was going on. We had a guy, just this is another story. We had a guy that was working for us, uh I think before you came to work for us, and he was on rescue. And so rescue went out on every run. And for a time there, 6 months or so, every single time that guy worked, every single call he went on, dead guy.
Ooh,
And you know how it is. It isn't like it's super busy, but it was probably 7 or 8 runs. And it
yeah.
was weird. It was every time the guy was on shift for a period of maybe a month, maybe 6 months, I don't know. And he'd come back, he'd be like, yeah, that guy's dead again. And you joke about it to deal with
Mhm.
it, but but that guy would joke and then he'd walk away and you'd watch him. And we got concerned and we went to the duty chief, the assistant chief, and said, "You got to get that guy off that truck. Put him on a
Yeah,
crash truck for a while."
not a bad
And
idea.
and, and everybody said, "Well, what's that guy? He's having trouble. He's having, he is running nothing but dead people, and he needs to get off that rig. So he's not doing this anymore because at that time rescue was going on every single call, no matter what they
Yeah.
did. So it was like the ambulance, and so and I don't, he seemed okay. We pulled him off the. I think they put him on the crash truck for a little while, and he ended up he did fine. He ended up going to. He actually went to Guantanamo Bay, I think. Left
Hmm.
us and went for a career at Guantanamo Bay. So, but yeah, so you know, I I always felt like I had a good support system behind me, and
Good.
I did not. Uh, I had really good guys take me under their wing for God knows what reason, and they put up the guardrails and kept me within them. Don't drink too much, don't get on drugs, uh, go exercise, try to eat better. Uh, I'll talk to you if you're having a rough day. You know, uh, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this right. And I think that's the interpersonal communication or the interpersonal relationships between the guys in the department. I think that's as important as anything else. But yeah, so just more of the same, man. I think you guys are doing a good job.
All
So that's it.
right. Anything else you'd like to add?
I love retirement. I'm
Good.
loving it. I never thought I'd get here, and I'm just having a great time. I'm having a great time getting to know my wife again.
Hmm.
Uh, we're it's just us, so we go out on dates and stuff, and it and
Well,
and
good.
it's just it's a nice it's a nice time. I'm having a good time, and but I miss it. I miss
Yeah.
you know I miss being a guy people could count on. That was kind of a thing for me. I like that. It
Okay.
was kind of a value added thing, and I tried to be the guy that people could count on. And now stuff goes on, and I got all excited the other day because dispatch called me out at home, and but they missed out. They kind of butt dialed me, and so I was a little, I was all excited, and then I was a little disappointed because I thought, well, they don't need me, and I know my family needs me and all that stuff, but
No, I understand what you're saying. Yep.
yeah. But man, I'm having a blast, and I really look forward to you guys being able to get there. Uh, and I
Five
and
years.
I hope that you do. And my recommendation is get your time in and really think about walking away because I think it's you give a lot more than you think you do,
Oh, I know.
And it doesn't mean that you hate it. It just means that, how much overtime, how many Christmases, how many Thanksgivings, how many kids plays or sporting events, all that stuff.
Yeah, it all adds up.
And the family, you instantly know a firefighter's family because man, it's just nothing, can't make this date. All right, gotta work. Yep. And they never like it, but they know it's part of the deal. And
Yeah.
it's just one of those unique aspects of the job. And so, but yeah, had a good time, and I'm happy. I'm done.
Good. I'm glad it's working out for you. I'm looking forward to it.
You'll get there.
Oh.
Soon you think.
Oh, I know.
Soon
It's creeping up.
It happens quick. And you
Mhm.
wake up one day and all of a sudden you're eligible to go and you're like, holy cow, can't believe. And you feel like, yeah, I got a panic because I thought I should have been doing this or that, Turns out I kept going, but part of it was because I had to,
Yeah.
circumstances with the job over at dispatch. But yeah, I mean, I just sat there and I said, where did all the time go, man?
Yes.
And all the people that you meet. So
All right. Well, thanks for coming on,
absolutely,
and
anytime.
I will talk to you later.
All right, I appreciate it.